Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Abaza, and it is my pleasure to be introducing Salih Itani. She's a Lebanese architect. She graduated from AUB, and she is a founding member, and is currently working at the NGO Architects for Change. She runs the KISS program there, and is also working on a project for community-based impoverished villages, which she will talk about more now. Please help me in welcoming Salih Itani.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. And my name is Salih Itani, and I'm an architect. I actually just graduated. I finished my undergrad at AUB in 2018. And my talk today is going to be more about sort of my personal journey through architecture and how I came to formulate what my track should be through this field and how I should be using it. So to start, let's go to architecture school. So I wasn't a person who knew from the very start that I wanted to be an architect. So what I would do is I'd take the list of majors at AUB, and I'd keep crossing out everything, and for some reason, architecture would just stay on the list. So I'm like, okay, let's just get into this major. How bad could it be? And I got in 2013, and this is the Department of Architecture at AUB. And I must say, it isn't exactly what I expected it to be. No one teaches you what architecture is about. You just go in and like, hello, this is architecture. And it was a bit of a struggle for me. I started to notice like these gaps in the educational system. So what would happen in architecture school, you'd be given a project. Okay, so design this. And I'd always be questioning like, what's the purpose? Why would I design this? And how am I going to try to solve different problems through what I'm doing right now? And what I would do is I'd always try to include this sort of social or public aspect in my project. So like, you're supposed to be designing in the city for people. And I'd get some resistance from the professors, and they'd always try to direct me in a different direction. And so this became very problematic for me. And I was just going through this existential crisis, like, what am I doing in this school? And then something happened. So what I was going through is like, if what I'm doing is not of any added value, is it really worth doing at all? And at the end of my first year, I happened to come across a group of students from different architecture schools in the country. And they were also going through the same thing. And this resulted in something called Architects for Change, which is an organization we've co-founded together. And what we believe is that architects build communities and not only buildings. And so our focus is, it's actually a youth platform of architecture students and graduates all across the country, where we'd be promoting the use of architecture and design, but actually for social purposes. And we really believe that architects have a very great role in improving communities. And it's really not about just like designing this building here and there, but it's more about the whole urban environment and how people actually maneuver the space. So the problem we're trying to solve basically is this whole urban growth, which I think most of you are familiar with in all of the MENA region, particularly in Beirut. With all this urban expansion, we're having a lot of different issues, such as lots of slums, we're having a lot of poverty, lots of environmental issues. And the problem is, as I mentioned, in the educational system, they don't raise awareness about the importance of this and the role that architects are supposed to be playing in this. So we come out of architecture school, and all we want to do is like design this best building so that people know me better than everyone else. But actually, from the start, what we're trying to promote is that you're supposed to be involved in all of these community issues because you really are an actor. And so basically, as I said, it's a youth platform, and it's really built on, it's very community-based. So what we do is that through all of our projects, we always work with communities, and we bring together the people to actually discuss all of these issues happening. And some of the things that we work in are related to, for example, public spaces, cultural heritage preservation, environmental issues, all of these issues that pertain to society. And it could be on very different levels, but it's always something that involves all of the community in the work we do. And we came up with a design process of how we go about through our project. So we do different things. It varies between workshops, talks, actual design projects. But the key here is that every single project we do is supposed to be of any social benefit. And the key I'd say here is community engagement. So whenever we have a project, the first thing we do is we actually start our research, we go on site, talk to the people, and because the only way you'd actually find out whether what you're doing is worth it or not is knowing what the people actually need. So I'll show you very briefly some of the projects we worked on. So for example, this was a public library in the Bekaa Valley, so where we'd have a lot of poor people and a lot of refugees there. And here you can see we were actually working hands-on with the people to actually participate in the design. We worked in Ramlet Al Bayda. This was the last piece of public beach available in the country that was going to be privatized. So we had an installation where people would just come and write down all their memories they have or what Beirut means to them. We created an installation in a public garden where people can actually come play the game Tawle, but it's like it's a one-to-one, it's a large scale. And for example, it's a library in the Goethe Institute, but the idea behind this is that it's accessible to people, so we worked on the design of this. And so as you can see, we work on different scales, but there's always this sort of like human aspect to it where people are always involved in the projects. And what was happening in parallel, so this is Architects for Change, but I was still at architecture school and I was still going through this like sort of, what am I doing here and how am I going to integrate what I'm doing outside with what's happening in school? And this is something that I came across during my third year, and I think it's one of the most touching experiences for me that I still carry on. I came across an opportunity to teach Syrian refugees through the use of art. And the thing about this, it was just very interesting for me that you can actually use art in order to teach people and in the way they actually communicate and infects them. And it dragged on a lot with me. And then during my final year of architecture school, I had to propose a thesis topic. And this was one of my inspirations. So what I was trying to tackle is the issue of how to use architecture in order to actually cater for both displaced communities and local communities in the country. Because for those of you who know, Lebanon has a huge history of displacement throughout the years, whether it be like the Lebanese people themselves or people from abroad. So I started out by mapping over time all of the crises that have happened and all of the refugee camps that exist in the country where you have the settlements for displaced people. And I ended up working in Beirut. I picked an area called Nab'a. And what I just did is I went down onto the street and just started to analyze, like, what are the problems? I talked to the people. Are you satisfied with what you have? And the problems were always about the infrastructure. There's lack of job opportunities. There's too many people. It's very crowded. No one's taking care of us. All of these sort of issues. And for those of you who don't know, Burj Hamoud is an area in Beirut that's built on Armenian diaspora. So everyone that already built the city themselves are also displaced. And what I did was, so if you look, this is a map of the area. If you see this yellow line in the middle, what happened is they built a bridge in the middle of the city, and they cut between both sides of the city. So now everyone living to the right of the city is the Armenian who consider themselves the original residents, and everyone to the left is everyone else who has migrated to the area. And so what I was trying to do is how can I use this whole area to kind of to create facilities that would cater for both. So what, for those of you who attended the session in the morning, there's this idea about like the refugees and like whether they're going to stay in the country, like if you keep them here, we're gonna have to cater for them and everything, but if we want to take them back home, then we're supposed to provide back there. So what I wanted to do is to give them the option whether they want to stay or not, and it's not up to us to decide, so we should cater for all the community that exists there. And so what I ended up designing was a community center where you'd have a craft school, because the people in the area work with crafts, so it would be an opportunity for the locals to teach and to learn. And there was also public spaces where the kids can actually go play, because one of the issues was lack of public space in the area for the kids. So another thing that was happening parallel to my studies is I applied to a program with the UNAOC. It's called the Young Peace Builders. And so out of 20 people who were in the program, I was the only architect. And everyone would just look at me like, what is an architect doing here dealing with social issues? And I just look at them like, okay, I could care. So it was an interesting experience for me because I started to get exposed to different ways with dealing with society outside the realm of architecture, because this is nothing I'd ever learn at school. No one would ever teach me about this. And this dragged on to various experiences. So I ended up going to New York, and this was a bigger group. So the previous one was just in the MENA region, and then this one was like from all over the world. You'd have people dealing with different initiatives in in their own countries, and it was quite inspiring. So this all led to something I developed called the Kids Program. It's a project I've been working on for multiple years, but now it's actually in like real development. So the idea is to give workshops to kids at different ages from the start on the importance of architecture and urban design and how they could actually contribute to the city. Because as I mentioned, you go into architecture school and you know nothing, but through this, it's actually, because architecture is a very creative means for people to express themselves, and it's also a way for them to know more about the urban environment they're in. And so what we're hoping eventually is to make this into a core program of the curriculum in schools. I mean, it's still far-fetched, but we see the dire need for this. So now we're still at small scales based on different summer camps or whoever commissions us to do so. And one of the kids wanted an organized dawla, basically, so, which is something we're really lacking. And so I graduated, and then comes the question, what comes next? So I didn't really want to settle for working for a typical architecture firm where you just design something and that would be it. So I briefly worked with UN Habitat on a few projects, and UN Habitat works a lot with urban development in poor neighborhoods. And so I got to work on two projects. One of them is in Tripoli, which is the second oldest Mamluk city in the world. And there were a lot of poor people inhabiting the area, and it was in very bad conditions. So this was one of the projects, and the other was in Sabra in Beirut. And this was also a very impoverished area. And what's interesting about their approach is that you get to go on site and you go talk to the people, and then based on what they tell you, you always work on the project itself, and there's always someone from the community involved in all the discussions that happen. So to sum up, basically, this has been my journey so far, and if I could sum up what I've been trying to do or what I believe I should be doing, is bridging the two concepts of architecture and social impact. And it has been very difficult because I don't think the resources are available for us to know about this more or to actually investigate. And as I mentioned, I'm going through these three different tracks, and I think these are what I really want to focus on, which is focusing on changing the mindset of architecture students, how to be more involved in society, and the children and the youth starting at a very young age, and working with vulnerable communities. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's this other reality that's happening, and we really have to also cater for that, not just the world that we live in. So this is my story. Thank you.
Again, we'll be taking questions, so who's up? First question, Rama.
Well done. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Excuse me. I'm wondering if you have built any of your work based on the works of people like Jumana Jabri, who was with Tashkil and had done similar efforts in the field.
Honestly, no. Like me personally, I actually not really familiar with her work. But thanks for bringing this up. I think it would be interesting to look at. Is she also based in Beirut?
She is based in Beirut. Now she leads Visualizing Palestine and Visualizing Impact.
Visualizing Palestine, yeah.
But she used to work in similar domains.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Visualizing Palestine, but not her in specific. But honestly, no, we haven't really worked on that level yet. Mm-hmm.
Questions?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really beautiful. My question is with respect to the fact, given you just graduated from college and you're still early into your career, are there any challenges you're facing, just considering the fact that you just graduated and you're starting your career? Are there certain things which you think having more experience or knowing more people could have helped you with?
Definitely, so there are multiple issues. First thing is I graduated, and the thing is at the organization, it's really difficult to full-time and have a side job. So I'm having difficulty managing a bit between the two. And ideally, I'd want to make it my full-time job and or wherever I'm working in to be very pertaining to this. But it's very difficult to find opportunities in this sort of field in the country. Like I spoke about the UN, but chances of actually working for them are very difficult. And usually, projects of such nature only receive funding through such large agencies. So for me to, like a fresh graduate who wants to initiate such initiatives, it's very, very difficult to get funding to actually continue with this. And it's also difficult to find perhaps the expertise or the resources on people in this sort of field. So that's also one of the issues I'm facing.
How other people in your area of work or research affect or shape your vision or work?
So you mean other architects in general or people I'm working with in specific?
Yes, the people working with you.
Okay, so the thing is, we're like at the organization, we all come in with the same vision at Architects for Change. And this has been helping me a lot because each one brings in their own interest and you start to develop it into something else. But at the same time, you have people from the other side who would always be challenging you. So whether you have, let's say, the architects who don't really care about these issues, they're always thinking about, okay, so what's the best way to make money? And this is always challenging us because this would reduce our opportunities while we're working. So there's that. And I'd say maybe that the fact that we, as the organization, we're currently just architects, we always like consult with people from the outside. So if the consultation is not available, it also makes things difficult for us sometimes. So I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah.
One last question. Oh, wait for you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was curious to know more about the community participation with the Ana Habitat. What challenges do you face after prioritizing the requirements and bringing them into reality or implementation?
Okay, so I only was there for a few months, so I didn't get to the end of the project. But what you're saying is valid because usually when we have these sort of projects, the main factor is always the money. And another factor is time. So we were given a very large-scale project to work on within 1 year. And I was very critical of this because I thought in order to execute something of this sort of size, you need a lot of time to work with the people in order to understand what they really need, in order to always integrate them. And even like just to get the contractors to actually start with the work, it's not doable within a very short period of time. And so coming back to the issue of money, for example, sometimes you'd have to compromise maybe like the things that you're providing in order to provide everyone with sort of equal opportunities because you don't want to prioritize one person over the other. So sometimes not everyone would be getting what they need. And one of the other issues that was faced is, so we come to, let's say in Tripoli, we come to an area, the whole area needs upgrading, but because as UN Habitat, you're specified one specific area to work in, you have to be selective with who you're working with based on who needs the assistance more, although actually they all need it. So this would kind of create tension as well between the people, like, oh, why are you helping them and not helping me? So this was also one of the issues, yeah.
All right, thank you, Sally.
Thank you.